Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. It's just 9 o'clock. Other people are joining us right now. So I'm Brittany. I'm the Communications and Grower Education Manager for the Idaho Wheat Commission. Thank you for participating in this from the field. This topic, how to control cheatgrass, has been a topic that we've gotten a lot of requests for this session. So we've asked Dr. Albert Adjesiwor from University of Idaho Extension in Kimberly to give us some pointers and help us reduce cheatgrass in our wheat fields. So Albert, I'll turn it over to you if you want to share your screen.
Thank you, Brittany, and thank you for having me. Let me see if we can share my, it's a host disabled screen sharing. I don't think I have permission to share my screen.
Let me do that. And just a reminder that you can ask questions, just put it in the chat or raise your hand, and I'll make sure that those questions get asked. Okay, do you have permission now, Albert?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you for having me. So my name is Albert Adjesiwor, and I am the Extension Wheat Specialist here in Kimberly. So today I'll be talking about how to control cheatgrass or downy brome in wheat. So the official name is downy brome, but most of us just call it cheatgrass. It's easy that way, just one word. So I'm just gonna jump right in. So as I mentioned, the official name for this weed is called downy brome, Bromus tectorum, and most of us just call it cheatgrass, and some people call it military grass. I don't know why they call it military grass. It's a winter annual grass, which means that it comes up mostly in the fall. And I would just want you to keep this in mind as we begin to talk about some of the control practices or management options. This is one thing to take into account because it comes up in the fall. Fall treatment tend to work better than spring treatments because it comes out of dormancy way before small grains do. So it germinates in the fall, mostly when temperature is just above freezing, it just comes up, and it will mostly overwinter and mature early in the summer. So before most of our grains start heading and maturing, they are almost done already. And so that's one of the reasons why it's very difficult to manage this weed in the spring. It comes out of dormancy, start growing aggressively before it can go out there and spray anything. They try to produce those seeds way faster, so to kind of get ahead of everything. They produce quite a bit of seed per plant, almost 400 seeds per plant. And when the seeds land the soil surface, they can stay there for up to 3 years. And so 1 year of a mess will probably give you problems for years to come. And it's a very competitive weed. It can reduce wheat yield by up to 80% if you have high enough density. So I'm assuming that most of us here have seen cheatgrass before. If you haven't, this is how it looks like. So when they start coming up, and I try to have this more the seedling, because this is the stage where you have to control this weed, mostly in the fall. So it has those twisting leaves that kind of go clockwise or counterclockwise, and it's very hairy. This can easily be confused with Japanese broom, but it's very, very hairy, and the seed head tend to be drooping downwards. So like that's one of the ways to distinguish with other broom species. As kind of a photo on top here, here is just how bad it can get in small grains, and this is in wheat. You can see when they are maturing, you see that purple colorization. And the funny thing is that most of the herbicide labeled for cheatgrass control also would cause this kind of injury, and so sometimes very hard to even tell whether the herbicide is actually killing it or is just maturing, just producing seeds. So most of our management options are herbicides, and so in the Pacific Northwest, we have resistance to cheatgrass resistant to a lot of the herbicide we use in small grains. In Idaho, nothing has been documented so far, which I was a bit surprised when I got here. But in Washington and Oregon, we have cheatgrass population resistant to group 1 herbicide, which will be our select max, fusilade, Adjesiwor, aggressor, and post. I made this bold because there is a new trait, herbicide resistant wheat variety that is bred to be resistant to this herbicide, such that I can apply aggressor on the wheat and will only kill grassy wheat. And so we have resistance already. I don't know how widespread this is. And so I will, at the end of this presentation, I will put in a request to see if you have any resistance issues. You can send it to us to do the screening and see what works best for your management going forward. We also have group 2 resistance in the Pacific Northwest, and I also bold this Raptor or beyond. We also have the Clearfield wheat is resistant to beyond, and so you can apply beyond on wheat, but we have resistance already. Once again, I don't know how widespread a group 2 resistance is. I got some calls this year that suggest that we have quite a bit of it out there. So if you have any seeds to send to us, please do. We also have glyphosate-resistant cheatgrass in the Pacific Northwest, mostly in Washington. And this is not surprising because that's one of the key herbicides we use for management of cheatgrass before we plant wheat. And so I want to jump right into some of the management options that we have if we have cheatgrass. I will start by saying that there is no single treatment that works best for cheatgrass, and so our best bet is to combine as different things as possible. So the objective of any integrated wheat management program would be to prevent seed production and also the seed from spreading. And so if you are planting your seed, just make sure you're not introducing it there if it's not there already. Mechanical tillage can work sometimes, but not your best option. And I would say cultural crop diversity is very important, and I would tell you why towards the end of this presentation. And then our favorite option, which is herbicide, which is what most of this presentation will focus on. So I would focus mostly on herbicides today because most of the other things we talk about, sanitation, mechanical, and cultural, are mostly general practices, best practices that we use in different crops. So when you are considering which herbicide to use, and this is not just for cheatgrass, there are certain things you have to consider. Most of the time, you don't only have one weed in your crop, you have multiple weeds. And so are there other weeds that will be controlled by that herbicide aside, in this case, aside your cheatgrass? And this is very important because most of the group 2 herbicide we use, small grains, can persist for a long time. And so you would have to consult the label to see for plant back restrictions, and based on your crop rotation, whether that's even a herbicide I can apply. And some of the pre-emergent herbicides used that are very effective against this weed require incorporation. Like we have to incorporate that before you plant the weed, mostly mechanically. And some also require water, like Adjesiwor or Antemplex. And so you would have to at least find out if you need to incorporate that, and that will limit your options, especially if you're no-till. And if you've used any herbicide in the past that don't work, just look at that, because sometimes you have the same herbicide chemistry but just different names. And so I'll mention something here today and be like, oh, probably that would be a good option to use. But if you use something in the past that doesn't work or works well, you have to find out what herbicide group that is, and that would help you determine whether a new herbicide is even worth investing in. And probably the most important here is the return on investment. So once you check all these boxes, you see whether it make any economic sense. So I didn't include any prices here today, just because it's tricky when you don't know where people get their chemistry from. I can give some ballpark figures if you need something like that. So I would start by saying that I went through some of the herbicide labels, and you see things that are labeled for that mention downy brome or cheatgrass control. And we have Avedex or Fago. So Avedex is a new formulation, trilate. It used to be group 8 herbicide, now it's group 15 by Gowan. And it's a pre-plant incorporated, it's a PPI, means that you have to incorporate this herbicide and to get good weed control. And so I will talk about some trial that was done in Washington State last year that they got a very good control of downy brome. And also Amber, Finesse, Roundup for pre-planting. So if you have, as I mentioned, this comes up in the fall, and so don't plant into an existing cheatgrass. Just make sure that you start clean. And so Roundup is one of the options. Gramoxone, and now we have Revitin that would provide some suppression of this before you plant your small grains. Olympus and Outrider, this used to be Maverick, and I'm trying to go fast through this because I have specific results from trial that shows how some of these are effective against cheatgrass. And Zidua, which is a group 15 herbicide recently introduced in small grains, mostly for ryegrass control, but also provides some suppression of downy brome. And Anthem Flex, which has this active ingredient in addition to carfentrazone, which also provides some broadleaf weed control. And so, as I mentioned, sometimes you just have to consider what other weeds you have, and if you need broad weed control as well, then you'll probably be better off going with something that would provide some suppression as well. And Treflan, not that good, but the label mentioned that you can apply that pre-planting on small grains or wheat. Post-emergence, and so Aggressor is the new coaxium wheat, and this can only be used on a coaxium wheat. And that's a herbicide labeled for use on coaxium wheat, and it provides excellent control of downy brome. And Beyond, which is for clearfield wheat, also used to provide very good control of downy brome on cheatgrass. I don't know how widespread the resistance is. So if you don't have resistance, these two options are very good options to use for cheatgrass control. Everest, Gold Sky, and Osprey would also provide some suppression of cheatgrass. And Outrider, which used to be a Maverick, also provides some, at least some suppression of cheatgrass. Powerflex was probably the best option available group 2 herbicide for downy brome control. So if you don't have resistance, that's a very good herbicide to apply in the fall. And fall application always work better for downy brome control. Treflan, I repeated here, which I think was a mistake. And then Prowl would also control downy brome, provide some control, but the results are mixed. Sometimes people don't see control, which I think was due to moisture. And so you would have to, this doesn't provide any control of weed that are up already. It only control which the downy brome is yet to come up. And so fall application always work better. All right, so let me jump into some of the trial results. And so I tried to include some results from the past. And so this was done in Kansas in 2002, 2003. And at that time, even downy brome was a problem. And Maverick, which I mentioned that is now Outrider, provides some good control of, it's not the best But at that time, that was probably one of the best options. And PowerFlex, as I mentioned, I will show that in the next couple of slides. As you can see, so I want you to focus on this Olympus plus NI. So NI is just non-ionic surfactants. And so like if the weeds are up already, you need to add NIS to most of these herbicide to get weed control. So we focus on the fall application, getting about 67%. If you wait till the spring, you are dropping that control. And this is almost consistent for a lot of herbicides used for downy brome control, cheatgrass control. You would have to, most of them are more effective when you apply in the fall because it comes up in the fall. By the spring, they're just too big. And also you would have to wait until they are actively growing by that time. Sometimes you just get out of hand, so you don't get that good control. And so we take notes, Olympus here and Maverick can give you some control when you apply in the fall with NI. So mention that Maverick is now Outrider. And Axial, which is one of the grass herbicides that we use mostly for wild oats control, it doesn't provide any control of downy brome. So that cheatgrass. So sorry, I kept mentioning mixing downy brome and cheatgrass. It's the same thing. So and I mentioned that prowl is kind of mixed. I've seen results somewhere where I provide at least some suppression, but in this case, they didn't find any control. And so maybe they just applied too late because these were all applied post-emergence. And so maybe all the downy brome cheatgrass was up already before the prowl was applied, but I can provide some suppression of cheatgrass. Finesse, not that much. And I should mention that Finesse and Amber have very long rotation restriction, up to 26 months. And so you have to look at this label and just see what crops you have and if this will be a good fit before you go in and apply. PowerFlex plus non-ion surfactant and just a nitrogen as also a water conditioner provide excellent control of cheatgrass. And so as I mentioned, if you don't have group 2 resistance, PowerFlex provide very good control of cheatgrass. Olympus, which is just Olympus mixed with Osprey, it's just like a premix formulation of Olympus and Osprey, also provide very good control of cheatgrass. And Osprey by itself, not that much. And PowerFlex, again, in this case, the prowl is not doing that much, so it's mostly the PowerFlex, and you can see from here that they're almost statistically the same. So if you're applying prowl, you have to apply before the cheatgrass comes up, otherwise you won't get any control. So fast forward, I talked with my colleagues in Pacific Northwest. I started this position last year, so I haven't done any wheat trials yet in cheatgrass, and so these are some of the results that they provided me. And so, as I mentioned, Zidra is one of our new herbicides for small grains, and the Group 15 herbicide. And so, the objective here is like if you are applying Roundup as a burn down before you plant your grain, and you mix that with some of the residual herbicide, whether you get good control in the fall. So all these were applied in the fall. And you can see that if you apply just a Roundup burn down, it helps a lot. So that also reducing almost the density of cheatgrass by almost half. And so it is important to really start cleaning in the fall. If you add a Zidra, you get some little bit control. And Fierce, which is a premix of Zidra and Valor, is not labeled for use in Idaho yet, but it's labeled for use in a lot of southern states like Tennessee, Kentucky, and also North Carolina. And so they have 24C label just mostly to control ryegrass. And so that's something that if it works well in the Pacific Northwest, I'm sure that we can get a 24C label as well. And so the idea here was to see if Fierce and Fierce MTZ, which has metribuzin, which is also metribuzin is labeled for use in wheat, but to provide a good control down in this case, not that much. And so I don't know if it's worth pursuing at this point if it doesn't provide that good control. But in terms of ryegrass control, they've seen some really good results in the south from this herbicide. And here they have Rise Up Smart Grass, which is not an herbicide. It is just a growth regulator. So it's supposed to promote germination. And so the idea here was that if you're able to get most of the cheatgrass up before you apply your herbicide, and whether then you can reduce the density right before planting. That way you don't have to deal with them much in the spring. But in this case, it's not really helping well. The Fierce MTZ with the Rise Up and the Power Max seem to work well in the long term in terms of this is early in the spring. So all these will apply in the fall of 2019. And so early spring up to almost 90% control. And so there is some hope there for Fierce MTZ. And I just want to mention again that most of the time you are not only dealing with cheatgrass, you have other weeds. And so that's a case where it might be beneficial to have something like this. And at the same location, they used almost the same trial, but then they added PowerFlex to the herbicide treatment. As you can see, compared to the previous table that you saw, like mostly you are getting 50, 60% control. The PowerFlex addition helped a lot, even though I presume they have group 2 resistance at this location. Otherwise, would have gotten close to 100% control. And so that helps a lot. And so once again, PowerFlex here with Adjesiwor pre really helps. So PowerFlex is a post herbicide. So if you reduce the density before you go to your post application, that helps a lot to reduce the density. Once again here, Fierce MTZ and Fierce are not yet labeled for use in Idaho. And so that's something to take note of. And so there is hope that if we are able to get a 24C label for some of these herbicides, we have additional options for cheatgrass control here. And I mentioned that Avedex, which is just Fargo, a new formulation, a granular formulation, is labeled for use in wheat. PPI means that you have to apply and go in and incorporate that before you plant your wheat. And when they apply 15 pounds an acre, got almost 60%, but when they mix with Adjesiwor, that's a very good control of cheatgrass. And so there is some hope, and all these are labeled for use here. So if you have the capability to incorporate this herbicide, this is a very good option for cheatgrass control. Sencor, when they add metribuzin to it, it didn't help that much, and so it's mostly the Adjesiwor and the Avedex which are doing most of the control. As I mentioned, these sites all have group 2 resistance, and so the addition of the PowerFlex didn't help that much in terms of the control. So if we don't have resistance, it's a very good option, PowerFlex, to go with. We are lucky to have the coaxium wheat system, and it's the results we've seen from the Pacific Northwest is very encouraging. But I must mention that even though this works really well, we have to do a very good job at stewarding this to make sure that we don't lose this trait very soon. So Aggressor applied at 10 ounces an acre with NIS, which is non-ionic surfactant. So here you're just using, so this MVO is just a modified vegetable oil, which is just a surfactant. And as you can see, the Aggressor provide an excellent control of downy brome or cheatgrass. And so if you have an interest in these traits, and you have downy brome or cheatgrass in your field, this is a very good herbicide, Aggressor, to use. And the recommendation is that don't use this 2 years in a row or more than 2 times in 6 years, so that you limit the chances of developing resistance. An open sky and all spray, and once again, group 2 resistance, and so non-damage control. But Aggressor really did well in controlling the cheatgrass. Like they say, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. So you can see the aggressor with NIS, and compared to see the density of cheatgrass is just impressive. The control they got here. And so if you are considering the clear field, which has beyond or coaxium wheat, there are two things to consider. Beyond would control both broadleaves and grassy wheat. The aggressor would only control grassy wheat. However, in Idaho here, we always have rotation restrictions with beyond. And so that's one thing to consider. It's take longer in the soil compared to the coaxium system. And so to summarize this, if you don't have group 1 and group 2 resistance, aggressor, beyond, Powerflex, and also Outrider, Maverick, and Olympus work well. If you do have group 1 and group 2 resistance, and then you would have to look into other options like Zidua and Avedex, and if you have the capability to incorporate that. Although I've tried to focus a lot on herbicides, I want to also mention that our best bet at reducing the risk of resistance is to incorporate some diversity in terms of crop rotation. And so if you rotate your crops, that will let you use different herbicides. And so if you go into mustard, for example, you have more herbicide option to control the cheatgrass before you go back to your small grains. And so it's very important to incorporate that diversity rather than like continuous wheat. I mean, that's what you have. And because you plant them at different time to, especially if it's spring crop, you might be able to burn down the cheatgrass before you plant your spring crop. And so that would help reduce the density. And so these are just general management practices. As I mentioned, it's a fall, it comes up in the fall, so just try, and most fall treatment works better. And start with 3. Make sure you don't plant in the existing patch of cheatgrass. Prevent seed production as much as possible, because that's where all the problems start. And you remember that if you use any practice repeatedly, the wheat will definitely adapt to the practice. And so it's important to diversify the tactics. I mentioned that we have resistance to this wheat in Pacific Northwest. Nothing has been documented in Idaho. And I think because maybe we're not looking hard enough. And so we are screening for resistance. And so you can just go to the wheat science website, UOPI wheat science website. And if you click on that wheat sample submission form, it will just send you an email and you can submit a sample. And so what we do is screen for resistance, and we look at alternative herbicide that would work for with this wheat control. So we need your help to know what is out there and how to better manage the wheat that you have. So it's not just cheatgrass. Any wheat that you don't have good control, you can submit that. So with that, thank you. I hope I haven't run out of time, and I would take any questions that you have.
Okay. One question, Albert, is from our new research manager, Garrett, actually. It says, given the current drought, how will the lack of soil moisture affect cheatgrass germination and populations in the fall?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. And so cheatgrass comes up at a very low moisture. Most of the time, the moisture required to come up is far less than what needs to activate that herbicide. And so most herbicide don't even have enough moisture to activate, but cheatgrass will come up. Remember, this is a rangeland wheat, and it comes up in with almost no moisture. So yeah, very low moisture. This will come up.
Okay. Any other questions? Just type those into the chat box if you have any. Why is Osprey not recommended to be sprayed in the spring wheat?
So it just, I've not used Osprey before, but the herbicide on the label just says don't apply and spray them with. So I just think that maybe just the risk of injury to the crop, and also these herbicides stick around for a long time. So.
Okay. It looks like those are our only questions so far, so we don't want to keep you too long, Albert. Thank you again so much for joining us. Thank all of you for tuning in to this session or episode, I guess, of From the Field. And if you have suggestions for topics in the future, that's how we decide what we cover. So go ahead and put those in the chat box or send an email to myself, Brittany at idahowheat.org, and we will see you in a month. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Albert.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for attending.